Welcome back into the channel, everyone. I hope you are having a great week so far. Today we're going to be going over some more CDL content, touching on opening weekend presented by Atlanta FaZe. I'm going to start off with some major storylines and takeaways from what we saw over the weekend. Then a little bit more kind of smaller, but still noteworthy events that I want to kind of keep on your radar. And we're going to follow that, and we're going to close that all out with some overarching themes I think that we can take away after this opening week of action. So if you do enjoy the video, please feel free to leave a like and maybe consider subscribing for more CDL, anime, and sports content coming to you on the horizon. But with that being said, let's get on into the major storylines from week 1 of the Call of Duty League 2021 season. Now, I want to start off by owning up to some mistakes and to being wrong, honestly, at least for the first week, as far as the first weekend is concerned, when it comes to the Los Angeles Thieves. If you go back and watch my preseason tier list video, as well as my pre-stage 1 kind of analysis video, you'll see that I was very low on LA Thieves relative to a lot of people, a lot of CDL fans heading into the season, but they definitely proved me wrong in week 1. So TJ played great in that first series against the Rocker. Slasher was making pivotal plays in both of their matchups. Temp has seemed to fill in to the role that he was brought in to play perfectly with the squad this weekend at least. And Kenny was always kind of what I was relying on with Thieves for them to kind of push into that upper echelon, was how good can Kenny be in this game. And from what I saw this weekend, he looks like he's rounding back into form as one of the top 10 players in Call of Duty. So all things considered, I was definitely wrong about Thieves, at least as far as this weekend was concerned. I still have kind of long-term concerns over how well TJ and Slasher will be able to play throughout the full season, but everything that I saw this week showed that there's a lot to be excited about if you're a Thieves fan, and I did want to acknowledge how wrong I was in that regard. So definitely 2-0, top of Group A right now. Can't be too shabby if you are an LA Thieves fan. Moving now into the Dallas Empire, who I think we all expected to kind of have that dominant weekend that the Thieves enjoyed. They rocked Seattle, which is something that we all sort of figured they would. And then they struggled pretty heavily in their S&D matches with Rocker. Now, to be fair, Rocker seems like one of, if not the best, search and destroy team in the game right now. So it's kind of like when we talk about Empire playing against weaker teams, it's like, take it with a grain of salt, it's Empire. And then in this regard, it's almost the opposite, where it's take their S&D struggles a little bit with a grain of salt because they're playing Rocker. So in the grand scheme, I think Dallas will probably end up being fine, but their upper echelon of the league looks a lot more open now than kind of it did before after what we saw this weekend, which brings us into another major storyline I wanted to talk about, which was the Optic and FaZe matchup. So Optic knew, all the players knew, especially if you go back and watch their pre-show interview that Hex did with all 4 of them, they knew that search and destroy would be their biggest weakness coming into the year, and boy, that really came into fruition against FaZe. Abizi just went absolutely huge in the last 2 maps, which were Moscow Hardpoint and then Moscow S&D. He was just a beast on the map in the search and destroy, just completely wrecked Optic, and obviously they got 6-0'd in the first search and destroy. And FaZe has really showed in that matchup, in my opinion, that kind of upper echelon ceiling that they can hit with all of the top level talent that they have on their roster. So while it is just the first weekend, you don't want to overreact to anything. Optic really needs to look at the mirror and figure out how they're going to handle search and destroy moving forward. Obviously, that's part of the reason they brought Karma in to be an analyst. But FaZe, just the upper level talent that they have, like just the peak that they can reach if all of their guys are clicking, like we kind of saw when it mattered against Optic. That's a team that's very scary and was rightfully considered one of the best teams heading into this season. And then finally, the team that beat Dallas, beat the reigning champs, was Minnesota Rocker. I think that people were a little let down by what they saw from them in their opening match against Thieves, And then we saw what Thieves did against New York. So maybe, Rocker wasn't as bad as it looked. They just need to start stealing respawns off of like quote unquote more talented teams early on in their series. It feels like they're like the reverse version of Optic, where Optic needs a lot of help in S&D, and then Rocker needs a lot of help in their respawns. But I feel like they'll win their S&Ds, and they just need Priesta to show up bigger in the respawns, which he did against Dallas, and that was a huge reason for their upset. If he can play more like we saw him playing against Dallas, I think this team could, like in a rematch against Thieves, I think they would very well give them a game, and it really, ups their ceiling as a championship contender in that regard, is if they can get the, like the Priesta that a lot of people sleep on in the respawns. I think this is a dangerous team moving forward, even with their loss to Thieves to kick off the weekend. Now I'd like to discuss a little bit about some of the other storylines I took away that don't really deal with like what was perceived as like the top teams heading into the weekend, but I still think are worth noting as we move forward. So starting off with the matchup between Florida and Toronto, which I believe was both teams' only matchup of the weekend. Just want to say Cammy and Kleenex proved that they are one of the best young duos in the league, and were a reason, like one of the main reasons I thought Toronto had a higher ceiling than a lot of people kind of assumed they would heading into the year. And then the same thing can kind of be said about Neptune and especially Awakening, looking great for Florida, but they kind of got a lackluster series out of Skies, which is a little surprising, all things considered. So I expect things to kind of turn around for him specifically, and so I still kind of consider Florida in that, championship-ish team contender category, and I think that Toronto showed that a lot of people should maybe start taking them a little bit more seriously as a team for the slaying power that they have in respawns, and for what they can do in S&Ds with, methods kind of calling the shots. I think these are two very interesting teams moving forward, and I think their matchup was a treat to watch, in all honesty. So keep those two teams in mind when you're talking about some of the top teams in the league. I definitely think you could see both of them creep into that conversation, which brings us to New York. And Clayster was very visibly frustrated after they got 3-0'd by the Thieves, which is fair considering that they played pretty close maps. Asim played about as well as you could ever hope to get from him this weekend. But then Diamond Con and Mac were really costing them in their series. And again, they're kind of in that same boat of Florida and Toronto, where they only played one map. Hard to really get a sense of like what we can expect moving forward. But I think growing pains will come with the young guys with Diamond and Mac. Those things are kind of to be expected. And given his track record, I would assume that Clay kind of has these guys rounding into shape at the right time towards the end of the season. And so I don't think there's any need for New York to be panicking. Like I said, those maps were close, even though they got 3-0'd. Definitely, like, if I'm a New York fan, I would just relax. And, if things continue in this direction, maybe you start to get worried a little bit. But right now, as it sits, I think they're fine. And then finally, I wanted to discuss Seattle and the Los Angeles Guerrillas. It was really cool to see both of these teams get a win after they were, very obviously the two worst teams in the league last year. Obviously, the gunless 240 hertz situation with the monitor was really funny to kind of take in from a third-party perspective. It's funny to me that, somebody who plays video games competitively for a living wouldn't know those sorts of differences. But it is good to see that maybe he got that figured out, and maybe we start to see scary gunless again, which is huge for the Seattle Surge moving forward. And then LAG, honestly, I know this sounds weird, but they're just kind of a team I enjoy watching and rooting for. Vivid looked really good in S&D, which is kind of to be expected considering he kind of came up in the S&D scene. Silly was playing very well in respawns. And then, I'm an apathy stan, dadpathy, papathy, however you want to call them. It is always kind of fun seeing that team do well. And I know that a lot of people had them as the two worst teams in the league heading into the year. I know I did personally. But they both showed this weekend that, given the right matchups, if their stars are playing well when it counts, they can get wins too. And that kind of leads into the big takeaways from the weekend, which we will get into next. So I just kind of wanted to take time at the end here to sort of reflect on what this opening weekend could kind of tell us about the league as a whole. And the biggest thing to me is that the shift to 4v4 and the league not expanding the amount of teams has made the talent level in the league obviously insane. Deeper and more competitive than I think it has ever been in professional Call of Duty. And all of the teams in the league seem like they could be competitive in any given week. There almost feels to be like two groups of teams, like contenders, like legitimate title contenders, and I wouldn't even call them low tier teams. I would say like mid tier teams. And this is where you can kind of get an entertaining set or series of matches if teams from those groups are matching up against each other on any given day. So I think we're in for some great Call of Duty as the year goes on. Hopefully the map pool and overall diversity of the maps gets a little bit better, though, as I was not a huge fan of so much Garrison being played this week. Like to see a little bit more Crossroads in the mix, maybe when they fix the spawns. That'll help. I like Miami S&D. Honestly, I know that people don't really like Miami, but I thought as an S&D map, it makes a lot of sense. Maybe we get Express in the fold. Maybe teams stop vetoing raids so we could get that one in the mix as well. But yeah, so all things considered, I think this was a great sign for the league heading into the rest of the Call of Duty Cold War year. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, subscribe for more CDL content. Like the video if you enjoyed, and leave comments about what your main takeaways from this opening weekend were. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Peace out.